I am very proud of the demolition program and the blight elimination program. There was a report that I think may have put some confusion in some folks' minds, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk about it. And it's been probably a year since we've talked about this in detail, and I think the story was a good reminder to me that we maybe need to talk about it a little bit more. So let's talk about the history of housing demolition. In the last administration, the city of Detroit demolished 5,433 homes according to the Planning and Development Department records. So over that 4-year period, this city averaged 26 demolitions a week. It varied greatly from season to season, but that's what you get if you average it. Mayor Bing ran the largest demolition program in America. At 26 a week, the next largest program is Cleveland, that's between 15 to 20 a week. And so it wasn't that they weren't doing a lot. The problem was this, that when we came in and looked at the numbers, there are 40,000 vacant houses in this city that we believe need to come down based on the Motor City mapping data. And at 26 a week, all of the houses that are vacant today that need to be demolished would be down in the year 2057. It was not an acceptable rate. And so we knew we had to dramatically increase the rate of demolition. It took me a few months, but the emergency manager agreed. You recall he used to be in charge back then, agreed to allow the mayor to take the lead on the land bank. This council supported me in the prompt establishment and appointment of the land bank, and we started in May of 2014. We had a new source of funding. It was the federal TARP money, which the state of Michigan reprogrammed when it was clear there were not enough mortgages to be renegotiated into demolition funds. And the feds set forth certain standards that everybody here is well familiar with. The demolitions have to be in an approved zone. So what you had before was demolitions could occur pretty much anywhere across the city. Hardest hit, the feds said it's got to be an approved zone that they approve, that you can only demolish a house the land bank owns. We cannot go in and demolish a private house with the federal money, and all of the work has to be complete, and the state of Michigan, the Michigan State Housing Authority, has to review and approve all the invoices before the payment is approved. The state of Michigan acts as the federal fiduciary, and they supervise every single piece of paperwork. That was probably 80% of the demolition. We also have funds from fire escrow, from block grant, from the old neighborhood stabilization program, from some quality of life funds, and some from private donations. And so about 80% of the demolitions done in this city are done under the federal HHF program. About 20% are these other various categories. And this is critical because every single piece of paper and every single bid has to be tracked to the source of funding, and it's something I believe we do very carefully. Here's what we've done. Since we started in May of 14 through September 30th, we have taken down 6,760 homes. And we can give you the addresses, and we have the list here of all 6,760. You can see the HHF, the federal money, is the great majority, 5,300. The others are the fire escrow, the block grant, the QOL, but you can see exactly what the numbers were. There was some confusion in the TV report for this reason. We count these when the house is down and the hole is filled, which is the way I think most people in this community view it. The feds on the payment side count it when the payment is approved. And because, as I'm going to show you, the paperwork is so extraordinary, there's often a 6-month delay between the time the house comes down and the time that we get paid. And so you usually see a lag of 2,500 to 3,000 difference. So when you hear 3,500 are on one list, that's the list where payment's been approved. 6,760 are the number of houses that are down. And so to me, that is not a confusing distinction. Right. They are two separate lists that we keep very carefully. And as you can see, we're knocking down nearly 100 a week. I have done everything I know to be transparent about this. And so every week we report the demolitions on the website. I just yesterday grabbed a screen grab of the front page of the City of Detroit webpage. You can see last week we took down 128 houses. There is no confusion about what we're doing. We're reporting it publicly, and you can look it up anytime you want. Here is the history of the publicly reported demolitions by month over the last 2 years. The right-hand columns are January to June of 14 and 15. The left-hand column is January to June. Right hand is July to December. You can see all the zeros. We didn't start till the week of May 9th. And then you can see how we steadily progressed. If you look at the far right-hand column, you can see what we've done. The last 10 or 12 weeks, we are between 100 and 150 houses down every single week. We are running this very efficiently and very methodically, and I think people appreciate what is going on, but every single number is readily verifiable. Demolition costs have increased in the last 2 years. That was absolutely right in the story. I haven't been able to verify the Bing administration numbers at $10,000 per house, but I have no reason to disbelieve it. It cost us $13,600 in 2014 and $16,400 so far this year. And what I would have preferred is that the story go into why. Because there is no comparison to the environmental methods that were used in 2013 as we are today. We have dramatically changed them, and this is not a criticism of the Bing administration. I'm going to show you why, and then you can judge for yourselves whether the additional environmental protections we put in are worth the funds. And if people want to strip them out, we can lower the costs. But I think we're making the right decision. So here's what we have done. From 2010 to 2013, demolitions were 26 a week. They were largely spread across the city. Basically, a house was taken down every week and every 5 or 6 miles. The environmental impact when you take down one house in 5 miles is minimal. It may not be to the people on that block, but overall it's minimal. But when you start to concentrate it, it's very different. And the environmental danger from dust, from debris, from leaving open holes, was spread across the city. Now, anybody who was campaigning in 2013, we saw them spread across the city, particularly the open holes. But here's our thing. When we came in and said we're going to dramatically ramp up the speed, and the feds said to us, you have to concentrate it in individual zones, that meant there was going to be a huge amount of demolition concentrated in very populated areas. That required, in our judgment, a dramatically different environmental standard in the way that we went about this. And so here's what you're looking at today. The green areas are the federally approved hardest hit areas. And you can see the blue dots were the first phase, the purple dots are going on now, the yellow dots will be between now and April. But that's what 7,000 concentrated demolitions look like. If we did not control the dust, if we did not promptly fill the holes, it would have been devastating to these communities. And so we made a decision to completely restructure the environmental protocols on the demolition process, and we knew when we did it, it was going to drive up the cost. We thought the trade-off in the protection of the families in the neighborhood was worth the higher cost. So what were the changes? Our environmental demolition standards are now being used as the best practice nationally. And I'll talk about that later, but people are coming from around the country to see what we're doing. So here's what we do. We now hang door hangers 2 weeks ahead of time so people know the demolition is coming. Keep your children, keep your pets inside. We use so-called wet demolition. We soak the house before we knock it down, and then we soak it after it's down before it's removed so that the dust does not spread through the neighborhood. We make sure all trucks are covered when they remove the debris. Here is a huge change that we made. We require our contractors to have pre-testing of their sources of soil before they put the fill in the neighborhoods, unless it's coming from a residential area. They cannot just bring it in and truck it in. And so our testing has, for example, excluded the dirt that came from the I-96 freeway. It was loaded with 40 years of salt. It excluded the dirt from the M1 rail because of the same problem on Woodward. It's excluded the dirt from the Red Wings Arena site, which has 2 centuries of commercial and industrial uses and had too high contamination of lead. So we made it very difficult for you to bring in soil unless we were confident of where it came from. This may be the most significant difference. We established a 15 to 30-day standard from the day you knock the house down to the day you fill in the hole. And we all know what it was like here 3 or 4 years ago. There wasn't a neighborhood I went to when I was campaigning, somebody wouldn't take me out and show me a hole that had been there 3 months, 6 months, hadn't been filled in. And the old process was that whenever you found clean fill dirt from a neighborhood that was being built or an office project, you filled it in then, but basically the holes were left open. We said you're going to have to fill it in 15 to 30 days. Can you imagine what would have happened if we'd have taken down 2,000 houses in a concentrated area and left 2,000 holes? It was not something we could live with. We have 4 field supervisors who continuously respond to the Detroit Now phone calls if somebody runs over your grass and the like. And then here's the other thing that changed. We aggressively suspend or terminate contractors who violate environmental standards. We have a lot of contractors in this town that over the years have taken all kinds of environmental shortcuts. We suspend them, we terminate them, we say when you bid, you can't bake into your bid price a whole bunch of shortcuts. You're going to have to make sure you follow the law. Those were the standards that we set out. Here was the first thing, and this was a huge change in culture. We started terminating and suspending contractors who were cutting corners. We terminated 2. We have suspended 4 others. We have had issues with contractors who failed to remove the asbestos before they demolished the house. That's a significant health risk. We've had contractors who failed to water down the building before they knocked it down, which meant there was dust to the neighbors. That is not acceptable. We've had folks put dirty fill into the holes without getting it certified. We've had a lot of problems with people not honoring the 15 to 30-day standards to get that hole filled in. And so those are things that we had to enforce. And the interesting process is this. A number of the original low-cost bidders that were operating in 2011 or 12 or 13 dropped out when we enforced these environmental standards. A number of the others raised their performance dramatically and are succeeding. But it is more expensive to follow the rules than it's not. And some of you may remember this individual out in Brightmoor. There was a story on Channel 7 a few months ago where the neighbors in Brightmoor actually caught this guy on the iPhone, and he drove in and dumped a huge amount of dirt in some vacant area of Brightmoor. He was a subcontractor to one of our contractors. The contractor was perfectly good. They hired a trucker. And the reason he did this, as I'm going to show you, is it's expensive now to truck the clean fill from far away. And so what he was doing was during a slow time, he brought a bunch of fill, went down a street in Brightmoor, dumped a huge semi of dirt on the property, so that as he had to go truck it into the various sites, he had it nearby. We canceled that contract, and we told all contractors, if you use that sub again, we're going to hold you accountable. But when you don't let people dump a semi-load of dirt into Brightmoor, it costs more money because we're enforcing the environmental laws. I think it's the right thing to do, but as I say, I can get the cost back down to $10,000 if we don't mind these things. Second, huge issue, we have to have the holes filled in promptly. They are a threat to our children in the neighborhoods. The other thing that I heard from neighbors when I was campaigning was when you left the holes there for a while, people came in and just did illegal dumping into the holes. They were prime targets. So now you're living next to a hole that's filled with garbage. And so we said, there's going to be clean fill. It's going to be 15 to 30 days. What happened? When you're doing 26 demos a week, it's pretty easy to find clean fill somewhere nearby. Somebody's building an office building, you can get it in for free. When you start going to 100 a week and you're demanding it be there in 15 to 30 days, you are now forcing people to drive very significant distances to truck in clean fill. We knew this was going to be a major factor in the cost. And so we had 2 choices. We either require people to truck in the clean fill from long distances, or we live with a whole bunch of holes in the neighborhoods. And so we took a Detroit company, AKT Peerless. They certify every single remote location where people are bringing in soil to make sure that it's good. They rejected the soil from 40 sites. People in this community should know that when we are going into your neighborhood and putting dirt into the lot next door, it has been certified as clean dirt appropriate for that neighborhood. So, these are the truck patterns today. And so the question that I wish had been covered in the story is, why did the trucking costs go up? Because the trucking costs are a major factor. Here's what you got, and it may be hard to see on that map, but we have folks driving from Port Huron to Oxford to Lake Orion because you have to go that far to get clean fill in the 15 to 30 day timetable that we're talking about. And so if we are going to say to our community we're going to bring clean fill in on a prompt basis, it means we have to be willing to pay the truckers to go 30 and 40 and 50 miles. And so when somebody says, why did the trucking costs go up? Trucking costs went up because we're demanding prompt service of clean fill into the neighborhoods. So that explains how we got to 13,600 in 2014. It was largely ending the environmental shortcuts and requiring the trucking of clean fill. Why did it go up again in 2015? And this might be something that we want to talk about, because in response to citizen input, and I continue to do one house event every single week in this community, there were two things citizens said to me that they had issues with relative to the demolition program. The first was we were leaving mud behind, that the grass wasn't taking and they had a muddy lot. And so we added a standard in 2015 that says to every contractor you have to put 4 inches of topsoil in, plant the grass, and cover with straw. If you've seen the demolitions in the neighborhood this year, you've seen them covered with straw in a way that they were not last year. So now if you think about what we've done to the contractor, after they pay to truck in the clean fill dirt, they now have to pay to truck in 4 inches of topsoil and plant the grass and cover it with the straw. And the second thing is they have to fix the broken sidewalks. I don't know how many times I heard from folks, I'm glad they knocked the house down, but the contractor busted up the sidewalk slabs that they left, and they left them still busted. So we added in the requirement that said if you break the sidewalk slabs, you have to replace them. And if you drive around the city today and look at the demos that are going on, you will see new sidewalk slabs in front of those demo sites in a way that you would not have in 2014. Those two requirements are the bulk of the reason we went from 13.6 to 16.4. The other factor is construction costs are going up in this town. Between the hockey arena, Children's Hospital, the M1 rail, and all the development, trucking and construction costs were going up anyway, but the bulk of the reason of going from 13.6 to 16.4 was the requirement for the topsoil in the grass and the requirements to fix the sidewalks. And we could probably knock $2,000 a house back off and do more houses if we leave the broken sidewalk slabs and we leave the mud next door. And I think it's a reasonable conversation to have. Should we do more houses to a lower standard or fewer houses to a higher standard? And again, I wish the story had explored this because I think it's a reasonable question to ask. But to suggest that these costs went up because we're doing something wrong, I don't believe is true. The bidding process, how does it work? The story points out the bids do not always go to low bidders. That is absolutely true. And we designed it this way, and I believe it's the right thing to do the way we're doing it, and I will show you why. The bid packets go out in groups to 10 to 400. Here's what we're trying to do. We have got a number of small contractors in Detroit who are good, but they can do 10 or 20 or 25 houses at a time. They got a couple of people, and maybe they're renting their equipment. We've got other people who can do 50 or 100. Rather than put out 1 or 2 really big contracts, we are breaking them up into lots of bids between 10 and 400, so we try to get everybody have the opportunity to participate. So here's the bid criteria when they go out. 50% is price. 40% is your capacity to perform. 10% is Detroit preference, 5% if you're Detroit-based, a full 10% if you're Detroit headquartered. And here's the reason that we do it, and this is again a change from the last administration. We have people who are very good at doing 10 and 20 houses. They'll bid on a package for 200 houses. They may be, right now, behind 30, 40, 50 lots where they haven't filled in the holes, and yet they bid on a new package of 300. We know full well that if we award them the new package, they'll never fill in the holes on the old package, and they won't get to the new package. So any time that the committee does not select the low bidder, they record a specific reason on the capacity of the lower bidders and why they aren't there. And Dave Minardo and the team will take you through bid by bid, but there's no doubt about it. We have some folks who bid on everything. And when you got 2,000 or 3,000 things going on, you might have somebody with a couple of pieces of equipment who bid on 1,000 houses at a time. If we awarded based only on low bid, we would be back to knocking down 26 houses a week. We are very mindful of the fact people of the city need these houses down. And I would say this, no state or federal agency at any point has questioned the bid process. They fully support our methodology and understand the reason that we're doing it. So the question comes, who's getting the work? Our first year, 63% of the work went to companies based in the city of Detroit. 90% Detroit-based, 44% Detroit headquarters. We made a real commitment to try to build the capacity of the smaller Detroit companies and get them bigger, get them to the point where they can buy their own equipment. And I'm very proud to say that this year, 92% of the work is being done by Detroit companies. We have Detroiters who are the ones that are getting rid of the blight in our community. It has been an outstanding program in the way that we have done it. And so when you look at the bid process, I think we've done a very nice job of growing the small bidders to their capacity, but not giving them huge contracts, and that's why we've been able to get from 63% Detroit to 92% Detroit. And I defy you to find another project that the city has ever done that has 92% of the work going to Detroit companies. So, if there is any question about the propriety of the paperwork, you ought to see what a contractor has to submit in order to do this. If you are a contractor and you knock down a house, you have to submit to us and to the state all of those informations, plus all of those invoices, plus all of those invoices. What I have in front of me is the paperwork submitted for 10 houses. This is 10 houses. We've taken down 6,700. You could fill a room. The state of Michigan at Mishta reviews every single piece of paper independently of us before the payment is approved coming back to the land bank. And so far, and this is the reason why there's confusion about how many, we have 6,700 that are knocked down, but we have 2,000 or 3,000 that are still in the paperwork pipeline. And I will continue to say, I think the people of Detroit care a whole lot more about whether the house is down than whether the contractors have been paid. And so Mishta now reviews, I would say, 30 documents for each property. They have so far approved 3,644 properties, which means Mishta has reviewed 100,000 documents in the last 16 months before approving payment. This is the most vigorously watched program I have ever seen, and at no point in that time has anybody suggested anything is wrong. And here's the oddity, and I guess why I didn't appreciate the story last week. On Tuesday, I sat with the head of Mishta, who told me he was extremely pleased with our administration of this program. He was proud to be a part of the best blight removal program in America, and he would be recommending another round of funding that will get us to April. That was Tuesday. Thursday, I was in Washington, D.C., in the office of the Secretary of the Treasury with his number 2 and the man who runs the HHF program for the entire country. They told me they were extremely proud to be associated with what we were doing, and they were going to recommend another round of funding that will get us through April. The top experts in the state and federal government are citing what we're doing as the model for the United States. And it's something I feel like probably ought to have been mentioned in the course of that process. So I mentioned before, next largest program in the country is Cleveland. I was brought in last fall to speak to Treasury's national conference because we're running the best. The Center for Community Progress hosted their national meeting here earlier this year so everybody could come learn from us. EPA, MDEQ have set the Detroit standards as the national environmental standards for how you protect people for demolition. They believe the money that we are spending extra is worth it because it's protecting the health of the community. And I think you probably saw this last week, but an independent study funded by the Skillman Foundation and Bedrock said in the last year or so, our demolition efforts have raised the city's property values by $209 million. And this next chart should make every one of you very proud of what you've done in the 2 years you've been here. Because when you backed this blight elimination program, we said we're not just going to knock down houses. We're going to take houses in lawsuits. We're going to sell them in auctions. We're going to get money to rehab. We're going to move families in. This chart here, to me, is the most powerful thing I've seen since I've been here. It takes the MLS real estate data, the actual sales prices of homes, and compares them last year to this year through September 30th of this year. On that map, the areas in white had fewer than 10 houses sold, so there's not much activity. The areas in red, the sales prices went down this year from last year. They're still going the wrong direction. The areas in light green have gone up between 0 and 25% in 1 year.
I don't know if I like that.
The areas in dark green have gone up more than 25% in 1 year. If you look at the areas in dark green, west side, east side, southwest side, anybody who tells you this nonsense about only downtown and midtown is benefiting, it is factually not true. And you look at where the dark green is, it heavily overlaps the HHF. The program that we are doing is working at a rate I never would have imagined. When in your lifetime have you seen that many neighborhoods growing at 25% in the sales price in 1 year? And so I guess I'm here to say I am very proud of what we've done together. I'm very proud of the environmental standards that we've set. I think we can have a debate about whether the sidewalk replacement and the topsoil and the grass are worth the extra $2,000 a year, or should we be doing more houses? And I'd like to have that conversation because I think it's a fair conversation. But I feel like what we've done is something to be proud of.